Get her out of my clinic now! The billionaire's voice cut through the room like a whip. The young woman stood frozen, her hospital gown trembling against her skin. She didn't understand. She hadn't done anything wrong, except being born with the wrong skin. The doctor's hands shook. One small mistake, one wrong syringe, and now her life would never be the same. The billionaire's name was on the label. His future heir, inside the body of a poor black virgin. Security surrounded her like predators, their faces twisted with disgust. She tried to speak, but no one listened. No one ever did. What he didn't know was, this accident would become the story that shattered his empire. Have you ever been punished for something you didn't do, just because of who you are? Tell us in the comments. Before we begin, hit subscribe. It's appreciated. It was supposed to be a new beginning. Amara had worked years for this moment, graduating nursing school, finally landing a job at the prestigious Fairview Fertility Center. The kind of clinic where the wealthy came to create their perfect families. To her, it wasn't just a job. It was proof that someone like her, a quiet, brown-skinned girl from the South Side, could make it in a world that rarely opened its doors. Each morning, she arrived early, scrubbing the polished floors, checking supplies twice and greeting the staff with a nervous smile. Most days, no one noticed her. The doctors brushed past as if she were invisible. The patients spoke through her like she was air, but Amara didn't mind. She believed that if she just worked hard enough, if she just stayed quiet long enough, she could earn her place. Then came the day everything changed. A new shipment of genetic samples had arrived, carefully labeled and sealed. Among them was one marked with gold lettering, B. Langston. Everyone in the clinic knew that name, billionaire, philanthropist, the man whose donations kept their salaries paid. His sample was handled like treasure, locked, logged, and guarded. Amara had been tasked with routine sterilization work, a simple job that required focus and care. But one distracted moment, one mislabeled vial, would set off a chain of events that no one could have imagined. Later that evening, she would replay that moment in her head 100 times. The sound of the freezer door, the faint hum of the machines, the doctor's voice calling her name from across the room. It all blurred together into the one mistake that would change her life forever. If you were in Amara's place, working among people who treated you like you didn't belong, would you have spoken up or stayed silent and hoped to fit in? The next morning began like any other. The clinic was cold, clinical, and too quiet. The kind of silence that made you feel like you didn't belong. Amara moved through the halls, organizing charts, checking supplies, trying to ignore the whispers that followed her wherever she went. She didn't know that in a few hours her entire world would collapse. It started in Lab 3. A couple had come in for their procedure, a private donor insemination. Everything was routine. Amara handed the labeled vial to the lead doctor just as she'd been trained. But in that sterile moment, under the harsh fluorescent lights, something was wrong. The doctor's brow furrowed, his voice low, tense. He asked her where she'd gotten the vial. She pointed to the tray, confused. And then the yelling started. The vial was from the wrong tray. Not just any sample, it was the billionaire's. The room froze. The other nurses stepped back. The doctor's face went pale. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he hissed. By the time the truth reached the top floor, panic had spread through the building like a virus. Amara was pulled into an office filled with glass and gold, where 3 executives sat behind a polished desk. Their smiles were sharp, their questions sharper. They didn't see a young woman who'd made a mistake. They saw someone to blame, someone expendable. She tried to explain, her voice trembling. But they cut her off. "Do you realize whose life you've ruined?" one of them said. "Do you know who he is?" When the billionaire Brandon Langston finally appeared, the air seemed to shift. He wasn't just powerful. He believed he was untouchable. His gaze swept over her like she was something filthy. "You people can't follow simple instructions," he muttered. The words stung deeper than any slap. Security escorted her out of the clinic before the day ended. No hearing, no defense, just humiliation. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed, shouting her name, twisting her story into scandal. The headlines read, "Clinic employee impregnates herself with billionaire's sperm." Her mother wept when she got home. Her church turned their backs. Everyone assumed the worst. But the truth was stranger and crueler. The mistake hadn't just transferred a life, it had transferred power. Days passed in a haze of fear. But when the hospital called weeks later, everything stopped. The test came back positive. Amara was pregnant, and no one could explain how. Brandon Langston's lawyers moved fast, threats, gag orders, offers of hush money. To him, she wasn't a victim. She was a scandal to erase. But what he didn't expect was her refusal to disappear. For the first time in her life, Amara didn't stay silent. She told the world her story. She described the humiliation, the racism, the way the system tried to bury her truth. And as her belly grew, so did her defiance. The media called her the virgin mother of the billionaire's child, but in private, she was terrified. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every knock on the door made her heart race. And deep down, she wondered, was this accident really an accident? Because somewhere inside the clinic, someone knew exactly what they were doing, at the center of it all. A doctor's signature confirming what she feared most. The switch had been deliberate. Brandon Langston's sperm had been injected into her body, not by chance, but by order. The realization hit her like a blow. This wasn't about an accident. This was about control, about power. The billionaire, desperate for a perfect heir, had wanted a quiet surrogate. Someone with no resources, no voice, no way to fight back. Someone they could erase if things went wrong. When the truth spread online, chaos erupted. The billionaire's lawyers went into overdrive, calling her a liar, a gold digger, a fraud. But the evidence was undeniable. The public was divided. Half believed her, half wanted her destroyed. Then came the night of the hearing. Cameras surrounded the courthouse like vultures. Inside, Amara stood before a room full of strangers. Judges, reporters, men in suits whispering her name like it was poison. Brandon sat across from her, calm, collected, smiling faintly, like he'd already won. He claimed it was all her doing, that she'd stolen the sample herself, that she was obsessed, that she wanted fame. The crowd gasped. But Amara didn't flinch. She lifted the documents, her voice steady despite the tears. "This," she said, "is the proof of what you did. Of what this system lets men like you do to women like me." Silence filled the courtroom. For the first time, his mask cracked. The world seemed to hold its breath. Would justice finally listen, or would money win again? What do you think happens next? Would the court believe her, or destroy her all over again? The verdict took hours. The world waited, screens glowing, feeds refreshing. Amara sat alone, her palms pressed together, whispering prayers she wasn't sure would reach anyone. When the doors finally opened, the courtroom was silent. The judge's words fell heavy, each one cutting through years of silence and pain. The court finds Brandon Langston guilty of medical misconduct, coercion, and racial discrimination. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The billionaire's face turned pale. For once, his power couldn't save him. Cameras flashed, capturing the fall of a man who believed he was untouchable. Amara didn't celebrate. She simply closed her eyes and exhaled. The first breath of freedom she'd felt in months. But freedom came at a cost. The world now knew her name, her story, her scars. People she'd never met sent messages of love and hate in equal measure. Some called her a hero. Others said she'd destroyed a man's legacy. But to her, none of that mattered. She had spoken truth in a world built on lies. Months later, as she held her newborn son for the first time, she saw the storm and the calm in his eyes. He was living proof of how cruelty could create something pure. She named him Justice. Her story spread across the world not as a scandal but as a symbol. A reminder that power unchecked becomes violence, and silence only feeds it. And though she still carried the weight of what was done to her, she knew she had changed something bigger than herself. Because when a woman who's been silenced finally speaks, the whole world has no choice but to listen. So now I'll ask you, how many more Amaras have to suffer before the world stops protecting those who hide behind their privilege? Tell us in the comments what you think. Show some love with a like and subscribe to stay inspired.